Hi there, I want to show you this video, Liberation, the Economics of Hope by Paul Hellyer. So let's move it up here a little. I'm not going to show the whole thing because it's 36 minutes long and my screen recorder only does 30 minutes. So I'm just going to start it here for a minute.
The following message is from a senior Canadian statesman and is a warning to the American people and others that their lives and liberty could be in imminent danger.
Hello, my friends and cousins in the United States of America and Canada and elsewhere around the world. My name is Paul Hellyer, and I'm a former Minister of National Defense for Canada. And I have made many YouTubes in the last 10 years or so, but this one is different. I would say that it's more important by a scale of maybe 100 to 1 or 1,000 to 1 to any of the others, simply because of the number of lives involved. I had someone at the top ask me if I would write a book and expose the lies that our governments have been telling us for the last 70 years or so. And even though I'm 97 years old, I said, yes, I will be happy to do that, because I think it's very, very important that people everywhere, and especially in the United States, know what's going on and have a chance to react to it.
Okay, so he's obviously, even though he's 97 years old, he's obviously completely with it cognitively. And if you listen to the video, you're going to find some things that sound outlandish and shocking. I have the link for the video below. I think it's really important that if you're interested in what he has to say, and he's talking about UFOs, the military, our money, I would suggest that you listen to it. Okay, so now the book, he's got a link for the book underneath the video through Amazon that I couldn't get it. I tried to order it through the link, but it said it didn't deliver to my area. But I found the book, and it was even cheaper in under Amazon too. But there's more areas than Amazon that you can get it. I just Googled it, and there's all these different places that sell it. So, and you can even get the Kindle edition if you want. So, part of what's underneath... Wait, that's not what I want. Let's stop it. Okay, so this is the Wikipedia about Paul. And it talks all about him. I've got the link for this below. Here he was a little bit younger than 97. Talk about his early life, his political career. What he believed in, where he's talking about extraterrestrials, his personal life, the books he's written, and then this, I'm just going to whip through this, talks about his past, and then at the very bottom of this, they have this link to disclosure. And that is here. It's a Wikipedia. I also have the link for that. This talks about, let me just say on here, individuals who have publicly stated that UFO evidence is being suppressed include United States Senator Barry Goldwater, British Admiral Lord Hill Norton, former NATO head and chief of the British Defense Staff, American Vice Admiral Roscoe H. Hellyer, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, first CIA director. And then they go on and tell all these different people, astronauts and defense ministers. Oh, him. And then there's a history of them. But they're talking about it like, let's go down here. Because they're talking like from 1944. Like that's where the UFO thing begins. So, to make my point, there are several cultures around the world, I don't know all of them, that talk about contact with the star people. Here's a book just for an example, The American Indian UFO Starseed Connection. And there's talking here about the legends and evidence that they are still in contact with them. So anyway, I'm back on the Wikipedia talking about different UFO information from the 40s in the United States only. And they just have dates on here about different times, chronology of UFO conspiracy theories. But it's not all conspiracy theory, because, let me move down here. Like this, Holloman Air Force Base, where, let's see if I can find it now. A documentary was made in 1971, including footage of a UFO landing at Holloman Air Force Base in New Mexico. And what it says is it was supposedly not the first time the U.S. had met these aliens. And it says, okay, so they're saying that the documentary had real scenes in it, and it also had reenactments and illustrations. And they're saying that that was really similar to Steven Spielberg's The Devil's Tower, or landing on the Devil's Tower from Close Encounters of the Third Kind. But they also say in here that the footage disappeared, oddly enough. So there's a lot of information on here. Some of it, Gordon Cooper is an astronaut, and he reports suppression of a flying saucer movie that was filmed. This lady, Linda Moulton Howe, is a famous advocate for talking about extraterrestrials and even things like the cattle mutilations. So some of these people are very famous. Bob Lazar apparently worked in where they were taking the UFOs apart and trying to put them back together and figure out how they worked, is what he's saying. And people are meeting. Let's go back. And of course we know that the military has just released information, slight information, saying they don't know anything, and we've seen the videos of the UFOs. I also don't know what any of you think about the United States Space Force that just started when Trump was president, I believe. And there's all this information here. This is a government website for the Space Force. Nothing secret here. And that guy looks really familiar, or looks like a lot like Eisenhower to me. but he's not Eisenhower. It says, maybe your purpose on this planet isn't on this planet. The FY 20 National Defense Authorization Act approved a new independent space force within the Department of Air Force, and this new military branch takes shape in 2020. Interesting timing, don't you think? And it says they'll be recruiting the brightest minds. And then they have where you can join the Space Force. And this is a really kind of cool site. Sorry, my computer loads slowly, but... Some people look to the stars and ask what if, and then you have to scroll to get it to do anything. Our job is to have an answer. So, the Space Force is to defend our country and freedom and to operate in space, keeping it secure, stable, and accessible to military space power and new waves of innovation. I'm not sure how much I trust that. There's video here you can watch. Advanced GPS technology to secure and improve communications across all military branches. And once again, maybe your purpose on this planet isn't on this planet. Okay, so I'm back on Paul's video, and I'm just going to move it ahead and show you a couple things that he talks about. It's 3 basic things, okay?
That people everywhere, and especially in the United States, know what's going on and have a chance to react to it. So this is, the name of the book, incidentally, is Liberated.
So you can find it under Liberated and Liberation.
Economics of Hope. But it's a very broad-ranging book and covers all of the major policy problems that we face in the world today, including, of course, that of money. And I'm not going to try and go into detail about each of those problems because it would be far too overwhelming. Those of you, of course, who have followed my work would probably understand most or all. Perhaps not all, but those who are in the dark, which is, I'm afraid to say, the majority of people everywhere, it would be too much for you to handle. So today I'm just going to talk about 3 of the policy issues, and then when you get a copy of the book, you can bite off a little bit and chew it until you get used to it, and then carry on from there.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is move ahead to the 3 things, one at a time, okay? Okay, here's the first one.
Now, the first item that I want to mention is the fact that we Earthlings are not alone. I think you can appreciate that with millions of stars and with many of them having planets like ours, that there are other sentient species in addition to those of us here on Earth. But we have to come to grips with the fact that there has been a lot of visiting to Earth, and that there are some species who have actually been living here amongst us. I only went public on this score 15 years ago. The score 15 years ago.
UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head. That is my unequivocal conclusion.
I had been Minister of National Defense, as I mentioned, and I'd seen sightings reports which indicated that there were maybe 15 or 20% that were unaccounted for, so that you could say they were unidentified flying objects. But I was too busy at the time bringing together the Army, Navy, and Air Force into a single defense force to ask a lot of questions and to investigate the subject in depth. During the last 15 years, however, I have made it a preoccupation, and the amount that I've learned is just, in my opinion, astronomical.
So here he's going to tell you what this astronaut told him, how many species there are that we know of.
That's what I think, too. Well, we were both very conservative in the number, because I have talked to a U.S. Army sergeant who has been involved in retrieving crashes of flying objects of various sorts, and I think he has a manual, he told me, where the U.S. Army describes 54 different species. And so they're aware of that number, and actually, I'm sure there are many, many, probably thousands more. Now, each time a U.S. president is elected, he is briefed and told a little bit about UFOs and the extraterrestrial presence and the extent to which the Americans are in contact with them. And he is told that they are benign with the exception of one. And that one is, of course, the one that is likely to have and continue to make the most problem. One more thing on this subject before leaving it, and that is that there was a Venusian by the name of Valiant Thor who flew to Earth and actually lived in the Pentagon for 3 or 4 years and worked with the officials in the Pentagon. And he volunteered to give us the good life, to give us their very advanced capability of curing illness and of growing food and all of these things that where they are so much further ahead than we are. And he was a beautiful man, an IQ of 1200, just the sort of chap you would want your daughter to bring home for dinner if she were dating. This, of course, is not how they all look, because the short grays, for example, and you've probably seen pictures of those, are short with very large eyes and very long and slender legs and arms. So that there is a variety, and they come from all over, and they look different, and many have different objectives. But we have can only hope that we someday, I didn't tell you what Valiant Thor had offered us. I told you what he had offered us, but I didn't say that the price was that we give up our atomic weapons, because the atomic weapons have an effect all over the universe, all over the cosmos, as a matter of fact, because it's a unity. And they want us to get rid of these atomic weapons before we blow ourselves up and before we make the planet uninhabitable for humans. So one of the biggest mistakes, I guess, that was ever made, and it was not the politicians, it was the military who decided that we would not accept that offer, and I would say it was one of the biggest mistakes that we Earthlings have ever made.
So that's a big deal. I'm going to move on to the other two now. There's more that he has to say in the video. So this is the second one. take back our money.
The second issue, although it is not the most important in the long run, is a massive change in our monetary and banking system. We have a banking system now which is so insane that I can't describe it in words. But we have handed over the right to create our money to private individuals and corporations. And they create it out of nothing, out of thin air, and then lend it back to us and charge interest on it.
Okay, so that's the truth, and that is definitely a big problem. And he goes into how if we changed it, we would all be ahead. So then I'm going to move on to the third one. And I love this man. I love Paul. He's brilliant in my mind. Okay, I just want to put the end parts here.
Most of you, I don't think, are aware that money is nothing but air. The head of the First Bank of Canada, Governor Graham Towers, said money is just a book entry. That's all it is. If he were alive today, he'd say all it is a computer entry. But it depends who owns the computer, the bank or the people. And I think there could be no greater contribution to the future of the world at the present time than for the United States to lead the way in taking over, I say confiscated in my book, the Fed, and leading the world in government-created money and doing the things that are good for the ordinary people and not...
Right there, I just really love it. And he's talking about nationalizing the bank system, which, if that could happen, that would be a blessing for all of us. And the only people that can make it happen is us. We have to demand it, but we can't demand it if we don't know about it. Okay, I'm going to move on to the third one. Okay, so here's the third one.
The third issue is by far the most important because the lives of millions of us are involved. In a word, you can call it the Fourth Reich. Until a few years ago, I thought that the Allies had won World War II. I found out to my dismay that that was not the case. The Germans had just surrendered and gone underground and have been working ever since. A lot of them were taken into the United States after the war voluntarily to serve against the Cold War with Russia. The United States brought scientists of all kinds and didn't want them to fall into anybody else's hands, so they recruited them and brought them to the United States and gave them new names, new CVs, and then citizenship and appointments to very important jobs in the military and civil life of the country. The operation was called Operation Paperclip, and you can look at it, Wikipedia.
You sure can.
Where it's described in some detail. President Truman had approved it after a while on the basis that none of the people brought in were involved in the Nazi Party, but obviously that just can't apply when you're bringing in the best scientists and engineers and medical doctors and others. And so many of them were brought in, and it wasn't long before they they wielded very considerable power. There was another operation called Operation High Jump, and that was that the Germans had been working to build a base in Antarctica. And I was always of the opinion that they just started that near the end of the war when they knew they were going to lose. And they took many of their best scientists and engineers to Antarctica to set up what they called the New Berlin. Now I found that they were working on it all the way through World War II, and with the help of one species that is the one that we are most concerned about.
One extraterrestrial species.
The Americans found out about the base in Antarctica, and the Secretary of Defense sent an armada to go and wipe it out. They refueled on the way down and got there and thought it would be an easy task to take over the base. A couple of flying saucers came up from the ocean, sank one of their ships, killed some of their men, and they had to go home without anything to show for it except defeat.
Okay, so I'm going to move it ahead, even though this is very interesting. You can watch the video yourself, because there's a little bit more I want you to hear because my screenshot thing only lasts 30 minutes. Okay, so I only have a few minutes left. I'm going to start it from where he's talking about Byrd, because Byrd went down to Antarctica and had to come back.
They moved the back engineering of the aircraft that crashed at Roswell to the western part of the United States, which would be again away from the spying eyes of the government and the press, and they called them special operations. They have been working in those areas ever since and have built a space fleet of formidable proportions. So much so that even though the United States has not yet formally admitted the existence of UFOs,
although they have
built a fleet of them, and they have more power than any military force in the history, or recent history, I should say, of the planet.
Okay, so notice he said recent history of the planet. With that, I'm going to leave it before it shuts down on its own. I'm grateful for you, and I am here at your service. I'm always trying to figure out where I am here. I hope you enjoy this video. Please watch Paul Hellyer. He's got a whole lot of other videos that are out on his channel too. But remember, he has passed. And a lot of information that I tried to find out about him, like he had a website, are not there anymore. So, anyway, see you later, alligators.